right, everyone, buckle up. Because today we're diving into a question that's probably crossed all of our minds at some point. Are relationships, like, destined to just end up causing us pain? I mean, it's a pretty heavy question, but hey, that's what we do here on these deep dives.
Yeah, it's one of those things everyone has an opinion on. And honestly, relationships can be a wild ride.
Right. It's like built-in drama. So for this deep dive, we're turning to this podcast episode that really had me thinking.
Ah,
Yeah, it's called Are Relationships Doomed to End in Suffering? Osho's Brutal Truth About Love.
okay.
And it's from this podcast called Curious Rays. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, yeah. They don't shy away from the tough stuff, do they?
No, no, they don't. And they're looking at it from the perspective of this, well, pretty controversial spiritual teacher, Osho.
Ah, Osho. Definitely known for pushing some buttons.
Yeah, so their main argument is that a lot of what we call love is actually just about, like, possessing the other person.
Okay, I see where this is going. It's
Hmm.
that whole attachment versus actual love thing, isn't it?
Exactly. And they actually use this phrase, we own them, which
Mhm.
sounds kind of harsh, but it really hits home, you know?
It does make you think, how often do we do that? We create these expectations and rules in our relationships without even realizing it.
So like it's a contract or something.
Almost.
And they give some pretty spot-on examples, too. You know, when we expect our partner to always make me happy or to never change.
It's like we're trying to freeze them in time. Like, I love you, but only this exact version of you forever.
Huh. Like a
Yeah.
bonsai tree, you know?
Oh, no.
Perfectly sculpted, but not really free to grow naturally.
That's a great analogy. And that's kind of Osho's whole point, right? Like, true love can't be contained. He compares it to the wind. It's free-flowing, unpredictable. If you try to trap it, that's when things get messy.
I love that. You can't, like, catch the wind in a jar.
Exactly.
So why would we try to do that with love, you know?
And that's where Osho's distinction between love and attachment comes in. Real love thrives on freedom, on allowing the other person to just be themselves.
It's so interesting. The podcast also points out how we often say, I love you, when what we really mean is, I need you, which is a whole other thing.
Oh, absolutely. It becomes about our own needs and dependence, not about genuine love for the other person.
And that can make the whole foundation of the relationship shaky.
So shaky. When we make our happiness completely dependent on another person, it's a recipe for, well, potential disaster.
It's like building a house on sand, right? Looks good for a while, but won't last.
Exactly. And then when the inevitable storms come and our partner doesn't meet every single one of our expectations, that's when the suffering really kicks in.
Because, let's be honest, no one can be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And people change. It's natural.
Right. And we change too. It's like we start guarding our hearts, right?
Yeah.
Afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah, the podcast talked about that too, how fear just sneaks in, even early on.
Well, yeah, I mean, we need connection, so losing it is scary.
It is. But the funny thing is that fear can actually push people away.
Uh-uh.
You know, we get possessive, jealous, all that stuff.
Like we're trying to hold on too tight.
To a handful of sand, and it just slips through your fingers.
Exactly.
But this is where it gets interesting. Osho actually says true love is fearless. Like, you should be okay if someone leaves.
I know, it sounds kind of backwards, right? Like, shouldn't we want to hold on to the people we love?
Yeah, it goes against everything we think we know.
But he's saying that clinging to someone out of fear isn't real love. It's more like trying to control them because we're insecure.
So if all that possessiveness is the problem, what's the answer? The podcast said Osho had some pretty wild ideas about changing how we love.
He did. His solution is to love without, like, any ownership, expectations, or fear. It's about freedom for both people.
That sounds amazing, but also so hard. Like, we'd have to relearn everything about love.
It's definitely a process. It takes a lot of self-awareness and being willing to face our own issues and practice to relate to people in a different way.
It's like we're so used to seeing love a certain way. Fairy tales, movies, even songs, they all show this idea of finding your other half, completing each other.
And those stories are powerful. They shape what we think love should be. Effortless, no problems, just happiness forever.
But real love, the kind Osho talks about, it's more like a dance. Sometimes you're in sync, other times you step on each other's toes.
And it's about navigating those missteps with understanding.
Yeah, accepting the flaws, the differences, how people change. That's where the real beauty is.
I agree.
But it makes you wonder, is that kind of love, you know, the unconditional kind, is that even possible for us regular people? That's the big question, right? Like, is that kind of love even real?
Maybe it's not so much about finding the right kind of love, but more about, like, changing how we think about it.
Okay.
You know, at the end of that Curious Rays episode, they had this idea that really stuck with me. What if the suffering we feel in relationships isn't really about the other person, but about the expectations we have going in?
Oh, interesting. So we're creating the suffering ourselves, not the relationship.
That's the idea. And it means we have the power to change things if we let go of needing to control everything to make it fit our idea of how it should be, then maybe a different kind of love is possible.
One that's not about demanding, but about accepting.
Exactly. Less fear, more freedom.
And that takes us back to the beginning. Are relationships just doomed to end badly? Well, if we're clinging to this fairy tale idea of perfect, unchanging love, then yeah, probably.
Right. It's like expecting a roller coaster to be smooth sailing. What's the point?
Exactly.
But if we embrace the messiness, the challenges, the fact that things change, then maybe, just maybe, we can find something deeper, something more real.
So basically, it's not about finding the perfect partner or avoiding every fight. It's about loving with, like open hands, letting go of expectations, and having the courage to be ourselves even when it's scary.
Well said. It reminds me of that quote. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
Ooh, I like that.
It's about looking inward as much as outward.
So to all our listeners out there, as you're figuring out this whole relationship thing, remember, love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone who helps you become the best version of yourself.
And sometimes the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you next time.